Ready to get started? Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Liu.
Present.
Vice Chair Kim.
Here.
Board Member Firth.
Here.
Board Member Guyer. Here. Board Member Balte.
Present.
All present.
Now is the time for oral communications. This is for items that are not on the agenda, and I do have one speaker, which is David Carnahan from the City Clerk's office. Welcome, David.
Good morning, Chair Liu and board members. I'm David Carnahan in the City Clerk's office, and I'm here to give you an update on the city's board and commission recruitment. The city is currently recruiting to fill 2 vacancies on the Human Relations Commission, 3 on the Library Advisory Commission, 4 on the Public Art Commission, and 2 on the Utilities Advisory Commission. All of these terms are for 3 years ending May 31 of 2020, and the application deadline is April 4th at 4:30 p.m. Applications are available on the City Clerk's website, www.cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. I'm going to give each of you a flyer and encourage you to share this information with the community and organizations you think might be interested, and then if you could each reach out specifically to 2 individuals in the community you think might be interested in applying. You are one of our best resources into the community, knowing residents in a way that most of us staff don't. So I'll pass these out, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you, David. And do we have any agenda changes today? Great. So why don't we start with first item, which is item number 2, which is study session for 1451 Middlefield Road. Request for review of updated concept plans for a 1-story, 14,790 square foot replacement and expansion building for the Junior Museum and Zoo, and reconfiguration of the adjacent parking lots. The ARB previously considered a preliminary review application on January 19th, 2017. The applicant requests initial feedback on design modifications in advance of formal application review. And the environmental assessment is no action is taking place at this meeting, and the zone district is PF. And welcome, Amy French, our Chief Planning Official. Okay.
Amy French here. Just make mine brief. You already summarized what happened, and what was requested was more big idea and some alterations as related to Middlefield Road. And as far as building placement and configuration, the applicants are here. They have some big changes to share with you today. And John Aiken is to my left.
That's true, and so all I would like to do is introduce Cody Anderson-Wisely, Brent McClure, and Sarah Vaccaro.
Thanks, John. Board, thank you for having us back again. After our last meeting, we went back and looked at a variety of different revisions, and kind of a lot of the comments that we heard were trying to have a greater sensitivity towards Middlefield and a presence along the street, not just give so much deference to cars, but think about bicycles, think about pedestrians, think about the civic presence as how this facility fits within the greater context of the site, thinking about Lucy Stern, thinking about the Girl Scout building and the sort of greater civic complex. Also, take a closer look at the fact that this building is sitting in a residential neighborhood with the Lucy Stern complex, and that maybe the architecture, although it needs to be distinct of its time and not too deferential, but that it needs to integrate likely a little bit more with building mass and form as it fits within the greater surroundings. What we'd like to go over with you today in this study session are kind of three parts that we'll speak to here. One is the site plan, and we've made some significant revisions with a lot of meetings with the city, as well as our client, the Friends. We'd like to then talk about the, we're going to call it sort of the big idea, but really the big idea more is about how are we reflecting, I think, the philosophy and the mission and vision of the Friends, of the Junior Museum and Zoo in this program into the site, into the architecture, and into sort of how we're integrating the whole facility together. And then kind of the third part is we've got some massing and building forms that are kind of in progress, and this being a study session, it's our hope to come back ideally for a formal, review at the next meeting. So even though we're in progress, we'd like to kind of get your thoughts and feedback on some of the massing. So you're going to see some forms that are not 100% complete yet, but they're far enough along that we want to get your input. So quickly, as I mentioned, previously this is the old site plan you saw. We had a parking entrance and drop off of the intersection. You had to drive way in. There were trees along the street, no real connection off of here. And this parking edge was really kind of tight to the Girl Scout building where, designed by an engineer, it appears, and that trying to maximize parking. And so what we've done is we met with the city and really rethought how the building sits within the site. And we'll go to a diagram here in a second. But in essence, what we've done is we have a driveway entrance that's not in alignment with Kellogg. So you pull in over here. The edge of the parking comes in it's pulled significantly back to create a larger plaza in front of our building to get more of this civic presence. We have a gateway entrance and pedestrian promenade that we'll talk more about in a second that directly links off of Middlefield, intersects with the park, and then creates an access, probably better if I go to this diagram here, this access off of Lucy Stern. So what we're trying to do is, this is an older sketch because we did change the driveway at the 11th hour, but the idea is that there'll be dedicated bicycle throughway that will link through the park and then come down onto Kellogg, and then cars will be pulled separately over into here. So disregard that on this sketch. But in essence, this diagram is trying to show all of the pedestrian pathways, and we're trying to create more of a civic presence and thinking about how people move through, in, and around the site. Major front entrance and access point off of the museum and zoo, still having the courtyard concept and design, which we'll talk about in a second, and then the zoo back in over here.
Thank you. Thank you, board members. So as Brent mentioned, the big idea is this journey, this promenade that takes place all the way from the street, Middlefield, to our JMZ entrance, and then connects to the park arrival plaza. And this journey becomes a manifestation of the JMZ mission to engage a child's curiosity in science and nature. And so it's this exciting, whimsical, playful experience of science and nature exhibits that children can interact with at their scale. So really the visitor's experience and the public's experience of the JMZ spills out into this entrance plaza. And so at each of these kind of portions along the promenade, there are different experiences of different types of science and nature. And so at the entrance plaza, we're thinking of things that engage in the physical sciences, the movement and patterns of wind, the movement of sun to tell time, the concept of sound and gravity. Around the Pecan Tree Plaza, we're thinking of life sciences, ways for children to playfully role play as animals, to have peek-throughs into the zoo, to pretend that they can jump as far as an animal. Around the Don Redwood Courtyard, we're thinking of ideas around earth sciences, so telling the story of the Don Redwood and the Jurassic era and the story of geological time throughout history, as well as linking that with the story of natural water systems and how we'll be collecting water during rainstorms and treating that in a bioswale that the kids will be able to interact with, bridge over, play in. Closer to the street where we're creating this break in the building, it becomes this tunnel entrance that we're thinking can be themed with the way light comes in, creating rainbows, capturing energy and showing children how that can be used within the facility itself. And then as you get closer to the park, playing with ideas of pattern and mathematics. And then moving into the park, leveraging this nexus and then the large park beyond to talk about scale, to talk about a scaled solar system model potentially that links throughout the entire park. Talking about the biggest things, a blue whale, a giant sequoia, things that can be represented along our zoo wall potentially. And really our goal with the architecture, massing, and site organization is to create the stage, the setting for these experiences. So the experiences are the big idea, and then our architecture supports them and then reinforces them through expression of materials and structures and systems that support the idea of science and nature. And so The massing is really clean and simple. We're referencing a gabled roof, but keeping it very clean, contemporary. Breaking the mass to create the tunnel entrance off of Middlefield, allowing the massing to encircle this Dawn Redwood courtyard, creating a really strong entrance plaza and strong entrance facade, creating a sheltered waiting area underneath the pecan tree adjacent to the entrance plaza. And then this mass over here is the future phase 2 part of the project that we spoke to last time.
So tying a lot of these pieces together, here's an initial quick sketch rendering showing some of the things Sarah just mentioned. We're thinking of having the building be tight eaves in an end gabled form to echo Lucy Stern to some degree in some of the residential context of the neighborhood. Given our budgetary constraints, we're looking at keeping the mass simple. We feel that having a clean, simple form with this courtyard concept and this frontage promenade in a lot of ways echoes the design sort of ethos of Lucy Stern and sort of the neo-Spanish, classical architecture, but then represented in a much more modern, way and a more of a period of our time. We also think that by having that contrast of simple, clean forms against this engaging, exciting promenade, we're having this opportunity to take what the JMZ is and put a lot of it outside in the public realm, so that it almost becomes an extension of the park, if you will, that as you leave the park and come through and experience some of these interactive activities, is what we're trying to turn over and to create. Out at the front, one of the things that we're thinking about is that this form then extrudes out and becomes a trellised room that then would have almost like a Nedcon-esque sort of wind sculpture design, if you will, so that you're not only seeing things, whirlybirds that are spinning, but you start to see it's more about the engagement of wind and motion so that you can understand and see the patterns and how it actually works. The gateway entrance into the, well, here's some images, just some contextual images of what we're thinking about with forms, possibly keeping things monochromatic even. The idea is that, how a child thinks about drawing buildings. In simple, clean forms, having some really large skylights that could act as almost whimsical chimneys that pop into the mass themselves. Playfulness with light, either with color and translucency. The end wall of the museum, which is back here with the entrance, we're proposing to have this be almost like a translucent material so that it has a glow, but it also begins to read as a clean form. And then some of the images Sarah was talking about earlier, we're really excited about this sort of kaleidoscopic rainbow tunnel becomes the gateway off of Middlefield as you enter into this promenade. This trellised area becomes almost like an antechamber of experiences that could even have potential temporary exhibits that they could either hang or use kind of out inside the space before you then enter into the museum itself. Here's a shot kind of looking out at the street. We're thinking of this being this sort of clean, simple form with this break into the mass. And then you can see how this really starts to create this promenade and this axis off of Middlefield. We're trying to find the right balance of not having a huge, gigantic gateway because we are trying to be sensitive to the residential neighbors across the street, but then still suggest, hey, here's a great pedestrian entrance into the park as well as the museum and zoo with sundials and wind tubes and then colored fins that could then become more dense to sort of subtly suggest that this becomes this entranceway into the complex itself. So with that, I think questions, hopefully some dialogue, and we can get some good direction. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So I will open up the hearing to public comments. I don't have any speaker cards, but if anybody is interested in speaking, I think now is the time, right? And so otherwise, we can move on to board member questions and comments. Does anybody, this is a study session, so we can have a more open format. Peter?
I'm confused. The drawing I have shows the parking further down Middlefield towards Lucy Stern, but the first image you showed us showed the parking coming in right into the main parking lot.
But he said this is an earlier version.
So we were working on the parking lot up to the 11th hour and the 59th minute between us and the city. And so I think the image that is most current is this one. And I think with the graphics, it's not as legible because we're showing all kinds of things on this. But if I go to this diagram, in essence, it's more or less this image, but the driveway for cars enters here. And this is a bike pedestrian-only entrance here, as you can kind of see here. So bike pedestrian entrance here with the bike path that comes over here and then comes straight across this connection point here into the entry plaza to the park, and then driveway into here with bus, drop-off zones back in over here, and some accessible parking that we're still working towards.
Could you just show me with your cursor, where's the farthest most edge of the parking lot closest to Lucy Stern? Is not the bike access, but the actual place where cars drive?
I can show you on here. We also have printouts if that would be easier to look at.
Just show me on with the cursor.
So right now, the edge of the parking comes here, and it stops at this edge. So the cars would not pass beyond this edge. So there'd no longer be a vehicular loop around this cluster of oak trees. The idea is to create a safe entrance for bikes only, for cars, and then for pedestrians. And that was working in conjunction with the city, with the planning department, looking at their long-term bike plans for this area.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Is there a delta in the parking count?
Yes. When we met with the city, initially we were pushing for maximizing parking, and I believe we had a net increase of parking with the previous design, and in meeting with them, we said we need to relax one of these variables and try to see what we can do. And what we arrived at was that the parking would hold close to, I believe, Sarah, we're neutral with parking? Right. Yes, so we have the same number of stalls that are currently there now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Robert, would you start us off?
Yeah, I like this approach much better than the first go-around. Obviously, there isn't much to look at when we first got it, but the way you've described it, I definitely think this is a much better approach than what you had last time. It makes it more of a unifying factor with the entire complex. You're absolutely right. There is going to be sort of some thought given to the, if you want to call it the pedestrian entrance, whether you make it sort of the tube concept or enhance it a little bit. I think I'd still, especially for kids, be more towards the tube concept than making it a big, bold statement. I think that's it at this point. It's a little early to, but I definitely think that you're on the right approach.
Q.
Yeah, thank you for coming back to us. I think, especially civic architecture like this, it's really important to understand and to kind of tell the story that the architecture is telling. And I think before, I was very confused as to what that story was, but I think I'm very encouraged by the approach that you're taking now, especially with simplifying the forms, but also keeping it interesting and really having a clear direction that I think has been laid out for you now. So I'm very encouraged by that. I appreciate the images that you've shown as far as the ideating for different concepts that you have, the tunnel, the wind tubes, so on and so forth. Having said that, I'm interested to see how that story that you started to tell with the outside of the building, the promenade, how that continues inside of the building as well. I like a lot of the changes that you've made. I like the fact that we're not losing any parking. I like the safer drop-off inside of the parking lot. I appreciate the greater buffer that you're giving to the Girl Scout building. And I think just overall, I'm a lot more encouraged by what I'm seeing, and I feel fairly confident now that you'll be able to take that with the building itself as well. One or two little comments or questions that I might have to add on to my previous question was certain components of the building that aren't clearly shown yet, such as the area that you're calling the tunnel between the bicycle parking and the wing of the building itself, is that an area that's fully covered, or is it open? Is that open 24 hours a day? Is that open just during museum hours? And also with the entranceway that you were showing, it looked like there was a structure where currently, on the site plan at least, it just looks like an open courtyard. So, you know, if you have any additional comments on those two areas, that would be appreciated, but I'm sure we'll get into those details as we proceed. So thank you very much.
Just to answer your question, I think the idea, we haven't finalized the design of this we're calling it sort of a tunnel. We are working towards getting it at parts of it to a childlike scale. We've talked about, you know, can you make it actually into like a rainbow kaleidoscope? I mean, there's been a lot of really exciting, a lot of energy and enthusiasm behind this experience. But the idea here is that I think as of now, this, we'll call it a walkway or a promenade, is open 24/7 to the public. And that really the edge where the cursor is here and then back to here is it would be more, this is an enclosed rectangular courtyard. That's part of the visitor experience once you've entered. But even this trellised entry plaza antechamber here is also open to the public. So there's a lot of opportunities to experience, you know, kind of playful park-like activities that engage you to people just kind of passing through and using that to kind of turn it in the facility inside out and kind of draw people in.
And Peter.
Thank you, yes. Well, I share my colleagues' enthusiasm. It really is a much improved design. I'll bring my comments down from the way you started with the site planning, then the child's journey, and the massing. There's two comments I have that you should consider, I feel, on the site planning. In general, I think you're really doing a good thing here. One is that you've created the strong access for pedestrians through the building, and it terminates, as far as I can tell, sort of glancingly off the corner of the Girl Scout building. And I think it's very important that that access terminate in the park somehow, visually, psychologically. And I can't say whether it's okay or not the way it is, but my gut feeling is that if it just sees the corner of this older building, that's probably not a successful visual termination. Either you need some landscaping or shift the axis a little bit. One of my thoughts was that if you put it off 5 degrees further or something, it probably doesn't affect your big idea. But I would just be very focused on making sure that the concept carries through at that point. The second concern I have is not to do with your parking itself. I think it's a great layout, but that there's been a lot of historical issues with people driving through from Hopkins to Middlefield through this parking lot. And that's part of why it's so circuitous right now. It would be a real shame to see you put this beautiful parking arrangement together and then have some neighborhood outcry and end up having bollards or some way for it not to function properly. Maybe this is better for staff to approach, but it'd be nice to be sure that you have neighborhood buy-in as well, that there's not going to be a huge outcry when you've created a very easy pass-through. Or you do something to just prevent it. That's just a heads up, but your concept doesn't work if it becomes a street, not a parking lot. I have to commend you on the child's journey presentation. It's one of the best I've seen for understanding architecture, civic architecture being brought to the community. It's a fantastic way to explain it. It really, really sings. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the massing of the building, I think it's great that you're creating this courtyard space, which is very reminiscent of many historic Burge Clark buildings, the Lucy Stern Center, the Palo Alto Historical Museum. It's fantastic to see you doing that massing. I'm concerned, however, that the facade along Middlefield, as best I can tell, is over 100 feet long, of a simple form. And I think there it's not going to be so successful. It's just a little bit too long and too unbroken to fit in with the residential scale of the street. And I think you really should consider strongly whether you really can pull that off or not. I think it will, in the end, not be just a simple form, but rather just not be loved. And it'll hurt what you're doing. And I think you want to probably give it some variation or modulation, or at least give it some more thought. The concept is good. Then I'd like to add 2 thoughts, I guess. I was at the Lucy Stern Center the other night, early for the theater, sitting in that wonderful courtyard outdoors, thinking about your project, and thinking, what was it that makes that space so great? What is Burge Clark doing? Because he would also argue it's a building of his time. It's not a traditional mission building in the least. And so studying it, I I realize he's created a fantastic outdoor space. Just the small details in that courtyard, the way it's landscaped and lit, make it so inviting, so pleasant. That reflects what Q was saying about keeping that pedestrian alley open to the public, the way the Lucy Stern is open all the time. But to really think hard about the detailing, and don't let your desire to make it modern mean you don't do anything. It's not just a concrete straight walkway. And we're not trying to do Corbusier here. And Burge Clark, when I was looking at it, didn't. He really believed in putting some details, a different tile pattern, a special kind of brick, carefully laid brick in different patterns. Not necessarily expensive, but it really works. I was also really taken with just the simple embellishments on the Lucy Stern building. The wrought iron light fixtures out front are fantastic, simple designs that are timeless. And it's crying out to have more of that on what you're doing. And again, you're not harking back to another era to put carefully thought out details. You can do them with stainless steel instead of wrought iron, but look at that stuff and think about it. He also does a really neat gave eble detail, the end of the edge of the roof. Just a slight modulation. It's not a big overhang. It's a simple mass, but it's carefully done. And don't give us Hugh Jacobson's absolute nothingness. Put some detail into it. That's the historical context that you're in. There is detail on that building, so don't ignore it. The third thing he does, which is maybe more difficult, but he creates wonderful covered outdoor spaces. The covered porches out along the entire perimeter of that courtyard is part of what makes it so inviting. The building is not so front and center. There's people there. And it's very practical in the rain. Again, you might consider that, as you're already doing some of that, I can tell with your walking here. But those are things that I think you can take away from the Lucy Stern Center building. Lastly, I understand that there's already a historic report being done on the Girl Scout building, but I think it's important to consider that building as well. In initial thoughts about that building and how it fits, it's one that almost wants to be this little wooden hut off in a park, which is fine and it's good. It doesn't want to be the building at the end of an axis,
Right.
which is kind of where I'm bringing to here. Right now, you've kind of got that building doing that, and I don't think that's appropriate, but certainly I'd rather hear you just address that yourself. So to close my comments, I greatly support the site plan. I think you're moving in the right direction. I also have to say that I feel that it's really important that this building be considered as part of a Class 1 historic complex. And as I've been out to that site several times more, and just recently thinking about it a lot more, that Lucy Stern building is pretty special, and this building has to somehow respond to that. What you originally presented didn't. So I'd like to see you keep that in mind here. Thank you.
Thank you, and Wynn.
Thank you. I share my colleagues' happiness with seeing your revised plans. It's quite breathtaking. Where's the stroller parking?
Sarah?
This is the question I get from the general public.
Yes, no, we understand that it's a very important topic. I'm a mom myself, so I share your concern. I think there's many opportunities. In the exterior plaza landscape, I think there's opportunities kind of within the more sheltered area underneath the pecan tree. I think there's potentially areas underneath in this entry plaza that could store a few strollers. And then once visitors actually enter into the paid experience of the exhibit hall and of the zoo, we're going to carefully plan for stroller areas so that moms and dads feel comfortable leaving their belongings in a certain place and then venturing out with their children, but allowing them to be close.
Well, I look forward to seeing adequate stroller parking in the unpaid area. Could you explain to me how the Dawn Redwood Courtyard works in terms of areas that are closed off or gated and areas which are not?
Sure. Let's see, what's a good plan? This is probably the best image to speak to. So the main entrance into the museum and zoo is kind of right behind this wind screen, if you will. It's where this blue awning is represented. So the taller mass of this building is the main exhibit hall, and then there'll be doors that take you out to the zoo experience beyond the pecan tree here. There'll also be doors that bring you out to almost a slightly elevated deck area around the pecan tree. The pecan tree has very shallow root systems, so we want to be very respectful of those and build up above the ground plane. So we're proposing a slightly elevated deck experience. So paid visitors will be able to circulate around the Dawn Redwood, and children will be able to climb down into different areas that have, rocks to play on or different things to investigate. The science classrooms are also ringing this courtyard, and so the idea is that those classrooms can spill out into the same kind of raised decking area and then also climb down into this. We're proposing that this area be slightly depressed and act as a bioswale for water treatment and so forth. And so the idea is that the kids would be able to climb down into this slightly depressed area and climb over rocks and investigate plants and so forth. And the idea is that that slight change in grade is what keeps the paid public out, as well as some railings.
Well, is there a fence that I'm seeing along the walkway?
We'd like to think of it more as an exciting railing, guardrail, if you will, that will have...
Is this a place where I'm going to tell my child, no, you can't climb that? It's private?
Exactly.
Then it's a fence.
We will make it fence-like enough.
Well, I mean, it's a barrier.
Yes, it'll be a barrier.
Okay, so I can press my nose to it. Great. And then, let's see, what else? Do they have any other questions? I very much like your idea of using that space to show scale. And you're going to need to get a park improvement ordinance anyway, so for the zoo. So if that includes continuation of your scale demonstrations into the main park, I think that could be fascinating. I lived for a while in Gittigan, which runs the solar system down its main street, its main pedestrian street. It's quite effective, I think. I think it all looks quite possible. I do agree that one of the things I really like about this design, as opposed to the earlier one, is you can imagine turning a kid loose without having them hit by cars. And I very much like the idea of you're opening this entry into the park. It seems to me it doesn't quite do it. It seems to me it's slamming into the Girl Scout, Lou Henry Hoover House still. And so I look forward to seeing how that might work more effectively. And we're still moving asphalt 30 feet closer to that house. So I'm curious as to what our better discussion of that building's function and history tells us about whether we can do that appropriately. But I think this shows enormous promise and achievement.
Thank you, Wen. I have a question for staff on this. And I think I was trying to understand Peter's comments with respect to the Lucy Stern Center. So I guess we have two things. One is the HRB reviewed the existing building, right? But would they weigh in on this project with regard to being a historic site?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I mean, the code does say the ARB can refer projects to the HRB, and this is one where we naturally expect to have it referred to, because the site is a listed, registered historic site.
And then the thing with the Girl Scout building is,
yes,
it's not technically, is that
so
my recollection?
there's no write-up about that house, but that is happening with the consultant. Page and Turnbull is preparing
eligible.
Historic resource evaluation about that, and so that will be available to the ARB and the HRB at the next, for the formal review of this project.
Okay, great. And then our PF zone, right, public facility zone, doesn't have compatibility requirements as, say, downtown. So how would our standard findings would apply? Is that correct? And
Correct.
So I was wondering
no context-based design criteria. But
so in theory, this could be, our code doesn't require it to, our zoning ordinance doesn't require it to be compatible with the Lucy Stern Center or the Girl Scout building, but it does have to have transitions, as I understand the code.
Correct. So that you're going to have the architectural review findings combined with the Secretary of Interior standards that look at, not impacting a CEQA resource with what's being introduced.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I don't have anything to add that hasn't been already said. I think the other board members have said it well. I support the project as you're proposing it now. And then I think the only comment I had was you were showing the park arrival place in between the Girl Scout building and your Phase 2 piece. I think I might argue, though, that my recollection is that from the Rinconada Park master plan is that they're trying to sort of connect extend their access through the park. And I might argue that you could bring the park entrance somewhere out towards Middlefield. And that's maybe not your project, but I mean, in the master plan, possibly. Because the existing driveway around the big tree closer to, what is it, Kellogg Avenue? That's like a pretty nice arrival point. Like as you have your bike, you're proposing the separated bike path. I mean, that seems to me to be like a really nice entry point.
Sorry, which location were you saying?
So, okay, so closer to, is it Kellogg?
Kellogg.
Right, over there. I mean, that could be an entry point into the park.
Yeah, because
I mean, that's
we're getting rid of the parking going around those oaks,
Yeah.
and so that can then be this sort of park promenade as you then come in.
Yeah.
You'll still need to kind of go along that walkway that cuts through the parking lot, but we're already planning to make that nice and special. It's an interesting idea.
And I don't know if that's really part of your project or not. I mean, because it seems like that may be part of the park master plan.
Yeah, so there's like a gateway entrance here as you then pull in this way.
Yeah. Because it would really connect it to the neighborhood and sort of make this park seemingly bigger. And so that's all I have. I think you are on the right track. I think everything's looking good, and we look forward to seeing your final
Excellent.
final application.
Thanks for your comments, everybody.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Which is item number 3, which is a public hearing for a quasi-judicial matter for 240 Pasteur Drive. Recommendation on the applicant's request for approval of an architectural review to allow the construction of a new biomedical innovations building for the Stanford University School of Medicine. The approximately 215,000 square foot building was previously entitled in 2011. The proposed project includes architectural modifications to reflect updated internal program needs, surrounding pathways, heritage trees, and the architecture of the adjacent hospital. Environmental assessment was an EIR was previously certified for this project pursuant to CEQA, and the zone district is HD. And we'll just take a moment to let the staff to make a transition. Great. Okay, we have Rebecca Atkinson, planner for the project. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. The project is as you described. Thank you very much. And the background information on the School of Medicine Master Plan and the overall Stanford Medical Facilities Renewal and Replacements Project is contained in the first staff report for this project. But as an overview and to reiterate, the School of Medicine Master Plan was approved in 2011 as part of the overall Stanford Medical Facilities Renewal and Replacement Project. The master plan includes demolition of 4 existing buildings and replacement with 3 new, what was previously called Foundations of Medicine buildings. The first building, FIM1, which is before you today under a new name, Biomedical Innovations Building, was previously reviewed by the Architectural Review Board, and the remaining 2 buildings have not received architectural review approval to date. The site plan is shown on your project plans, as well as here on the site, on this slide. The proposed building, the north side of the building faces Pasteur, and to the east is Edwards, and to the west is Lucas. The proposed elevations are the same as what you saw before in December. And the ground floor plan remains the same as well. There have been some modifications to the landscape plan and so forth, as shown in your updated plan set from March 9th. I have the previously approved elevations from 2011, should you need them in your discussions today. And also the previously approved ground floor plan. You also have that in a plan set that you received in December. These key items are undergoing review by staff, and detailed conditions of approval are being prepared to address these key items, including reaffirmment of the need for the 2011 conditions of approval to remain in effect, as well as the previous Stanford Medical EIR mitigation measures. The conditions of approval would also contain a confirmation of how much floor area would be used in this first BMI building versus what is remaining, because there's a requirement for a no net loss, or sorry, no net gain of floor area. The total School of Medicine master plan build out would be the demolition of 415,000 square feet of total gross floor area, and there would be no net loss. So in terms of actually considering this Biomedical Innovations Building today before you, since December, since you saw the project last in December, the floor area has been confirmed to be 202,450 square feet, and the remaining would be 212,763 square feet. At this stage, staff would welcome comments from the ARB, including comments on the building design, landscape plan, and any item requested to return to subcommittee for this BMI building if there happened to be anything, and also any feedback from the ARB on future distribution and massing of the remaining floor area, or any comments on the design of the corner, design on the corner of the forthcoming second building in order to create a gateway. To reiterate, any forthcoming building would come back to the Architectural Review Board. At the last ARB meeting, which was in December, the applicant heard the unanimously approved motion from the ARB to provide a more detailed landscaping plans and also provide studies on building entrances. The applicant has provided an updated project description and a response to ARB comments in attachment A. And they also have a detailed presentation for you and a model that they'd like to show you. Since the submittal of this project, staff has not received any public comments on the project. Staff recommends review of the project today and recommendations to staff and the director regarding approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. I forgot to mention that the March 9th plan set, there's a new page submitted at Places. It's an updated site utilities plan and stormwater plan that attempts to reconcile those sheets in the March 9th plan set, reconcile to the landscape plans. Thank you.
Jonathan.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, and board members. So just to reiterate, there was a discussion that the board had in December, and there was a variety of comments that were made. The board's motion focused on two discrete aspects of the project, which are detailed in your staff report, and that's the focus of the board's review this evening. It's having to do with the entry and the landscape plan, and that's where the focus of the review should be, and our recommendation again is for approval of that project.
Great. And so now's the time for the applicant presentation. You have 10 minutes.
Good morning, Board. Thank you for having us back today. I'm Justin Brooks from ZGF Architects. I'm joined today by my colleagues Tom Leader and Eric Prince from TLS Studio, our landscape architect on the job. Wanted to spend some time today talking to you about the two key design issues that were just laid out. First, the discussion of building entry and its disposition, particularly in relationship to the overall campus planning construct of the School of Medicine campus, as well as invite TLS to spend some time explaining in detail the landscape approach and the landscape plan. So in regards to building entry, first I want to bring us back to orienting where this building exists within the context of the School of Medicine campus. It exists at the border adjacent to the medical center, but is a building that is part of the School of Medicine. In the slide indicated on the screen, that is the area to the south, right? And so this building is really serving the vast majority of its population, dare say nearly all, is being served from the south of our site, from the School of Medicine, as opposed to from the hospital. We expect very little cross-traffic in terms of actual building users coming from the hospital into this facility, and in fact would encourage that there should not be. This is a research building that is intended for research, which needs to be in a fairly secure and discrete environment. The School of Medicine campus is comprised of a series of gateways and campus nodes which create entry points. So the gateways are generally more outscaled elements or apertures or openings at the edge of the campus armature. The nodes exist after those gateway points, and that is traditionally on this campus where we find building entry. So there is a sequence, an expected sequence of building entry where you move through a gateway element, which, as we described to you in our last meeting, has been created through the formation of this large overhanging trellis, which celebrates the heritage Coast Live oaks and brings you into what we are calling BMI Plaza. That BMI Plaza, which is the top left square indicated on the screen here, really becomes the organizing structure for building entries both in our facility, the CCSR facility, Beckman to the south, and future BMI 2. So we're using that space as the wayfinding device for physical building entry. However, the gateway, the trellis, really is the campus entry indicator if you are to move from Pasteur or from the hospital onto campus. Within that exterior space, the BMI Plaza, our building lobby is intended to extend the interior space into the exterior and vice versa. The ground plane has been treated in such a way to pull exterior materials through into the building lobby. We've used high transparent glass to increase the visibility into the lobby space and have carried interior and exterior materials on the soffits and walls of that space inside and out, so as to really indicate and give the impression that this building is sort of putting a foot into the BMI Plaza, and that in terms of wayfinding, it really allows you to find your way into the space in a logical way, arranged with the CCSR entry porch to the south. So looking at that entry condition from the BMI Plaza and just passing through the gateway element, As I mentioned, we're using high transparent glass, so low iron glass is something we've explored since last speaking with you to try and increase the transparency, minimize reflectivity, so there really is a view into the space, gives you a sense of what is going on within that space, and gives a sense of those materials extending from the plaza inside of the building. Again, here you can see a relationship between this building entry and the building entry of the CCSR project to the south and in the distance here. So having those relationships is important because that's where we see the interaction and overlap of building users coming from. And looking to the north, back towards the hospital, again, that extension of materials inside and out, looking back through the large gateway aperture, which is the trellis moment at the edge of Pasteur. I invite TLS to spend a little bit of time talking about the programmatic elements around the site and how each of these spaces is to be used relative to gateway and entry and some of the secondary and tertiary spaces. So, Tom, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Tom Leader, TLS Landscape Architecture, and I'm joined by Eric Prince, my partner. I figured out this morning, you know, I've been working on this piece of land since 1988, when this was all just a big parking lot for the hospital. And it did have some big, majestic oak trees. And over the course of the years, different things have occurred, obviously. First, CCSR was built, and I was involved in the design and construction of the garden there, and the plaza that currently exists that is shared by Beckman entry and CCSR. It was always envisioned as a kind of a sunny living room space where we could gather together people from those two structures. In 2001, we were involved in the beginning of the planning of the medical school campus. And Dean Phil Pizzo was key in this, and his vision was we need to get researchers out of the hospital. We need to have our own campus. And although we've got Clark Center and we've got CCSR, we need to develop a whole campus of its own, strictly, you know, with a face, putting a face on research. So the plan that came forward during that time had a few key principles, and one was to create a series of porches for arrival to these buildings, so that there's not just a door, that there's a space out in front where people can gather as they move in and out, and see each other, people that are working inside the building. And then second, to organize these porches together and to aggregate them so that off of a few key spaces like Justin outlined, you will bump into various people from other facilities at the same time. And so during that planning, it was really felt important to take that existing plaza at CCSR and group more entries around it. One of the most interactive spaces, frankly, on the whole medical school campus from in that regard. We'll end up finally with like 4 porches all working together. So then during the, I don't know, several years ago, we presented to you the planning of the area. It was called FIM planning at that time, Foundations in Medicine. And this idea was brought forward of aggregating 4 entries around this plaza, and that facing the hospital is in a gateway that is really entry to the entire medical school. It's not identified only with one facility. That was kind of a key principle of what we're doing. And now we're at that moment where something will be built. And I would just take the moment to say that one of the key reasons why you do these things is for collaboration. These are researchers, and they're closeted away, you know, at their desk, and when they come out at lunch, and when they enter and exit the building, it's good to cross paths with other people, not only in your facility, but other facilities, so that collaboration really happens, that research exchange ideas, and social life really develops really kind of in that space. It's a living room for the whole school. So that is really why this has been figured out this way, and it's been that way for a while. And so I think that this is a really key issue, and that if the entry was really on the front side, they're going to be separated from the life that's moving in and out of the other 3 porches. They really ought to be together for that reason. And on the, sorry, let me just go back. So BMI Plaza was really shared by 4, and then there are 2 key spaces at the front. And those ancient oak trees, they're still there. And those spaces are about making a home for them, making sure that they survive, that we're following the most important and functional horticultural principles, exposure, drainage, and use of materials that will reduce impact and compaction of soil, things that are a detriment to big oak trees. So there's spaces for use, but that entry at the front is a lot about making the space for an oak tree that is less trafficked, and it's also 4 feet down from the entry to the building. So from a horticulture reason, you really want to separate, I think, the entry and locate it at the plaza. And this is the space, one of these spaces at the front where this oak tree finds a home. And so we have cypress trees indicating the entry to the entire campus, relating to the Tommy Church entry to the hospital in general. And I'm going to ask Eric Prince to kind of go through the detail of the landscape as we move around the building.
Okay, well, I'll touch on this real quick so you can have time for questions. This Gateway Plaza, it really is a gateway. We're putting a frame around that oak tree in material and grading, and allowing a plaza to exist outside of that oak tree as a kind of threshold from the promenade into the space. And this is slightly more social in nature. And then zooming out along Pasteur, these two oak groves are interrupted by an alley of elm trees that move throughout Pasteur that are greater than this site, but move all along Pasteur. And in between, we have a light well. You can see the section in the upper left. And this light well is bringing light to lab buildings, but then along that slope is planted with some native woodland plantings along that slope. They're really diverse and beautiful. And then the northwest oak grove is more passive in nature. We're using a lot of existing materials, stone and aggregate mulch, and leaving that platform very open and flexible. As you turn the corner along Governor's Avenue, we have this being as a major bike corridor for the university, where a lot of bike facilities, bike parking, an alley of sycamores that are moving throughout. And lastly, along Cooper Lane, this is a very shaded alley of using native planting along that way. That you can see a view here and under the canopy of CCSR with some lawn panels for gathering. And then lastly, this is all just to say all the planting is working within the existing planting context, whether it's the cypress trees that are pulling from the hospital to the alley of elms that are moving along Pasteur. We're using this palette that ingrains and works with a greater campus setting in addition with the heritage oaks.
Thank you.
Great.
So welcome
Thank you.
your questions.
Yes. So if there are any members of the public that would like to speak to this item, now is the time. Seeing none, we will move on to board member questions. Any questions? Peter?
Yes, I have two questions, I guess. One for the applicant. Regarding the Gateway Plaza, is there a direct connection from the building to the plaza? I see on the plan here a series of, looks like thicker pilasters on the building and glazed openings. And then secondly, what is the elevation difference between the interior floor of the building to the plaza? I'm sure all that information's here, but there's over 100 pages.
There is not a direct connection through those thickened pilasters beyond. It's a visual connection through the thickened pilasters to the Gateway Plaza. You've hit on a good point, which is sort of a limitation on why there is not. There's a 3.5-foot grade difference between building grade, which is working around the entire site to make primary and secondary entries work. That grade is fixed because we are working very hard to protect those heritage live oaks, so not overgrading them, not changing the grading condition, or constructing ramps, stairs, or otherwise to mitigate the grade change into that space.
Thank you. My other question is for staff, and again, there's just such a pile of papers, it's hard to find the answer, I'm sure is here, but where are the findings that we should be using to approve this? What I see is a set of findings from 2010 with all 16 of them. Is that what we're following?
Yeah, so because the project is subject to a development agreement, it locks in the findings that were in place at the time that the agreement was entered into. So it's you may recall the 16 findings that the board had. So it's those same findings. Now, the responses to those findings may get adjusted if as needed to respond to the specific project.
So there's no written findings specific to this project in this packet?
We've borrowed from the previous project and the same conditions, and as we indicated in the staff report, there might be some adjustments that we make to some of that criteria when the director signs off on the project. However, the board is certainly welcome to make comments on the findings if as needed.
So just to understand, the findings that I'm seeing here are the exact same findings as was approved in 2010? Thank you.
I have a question if nobody else has a comment. I think mine's actually a comment. So for staff, the listing for this project, and also some references in the drawing sets mention heritage trees. And I've been corrected by the city attorney on past projects. So we have heritage trees, protected trees, and regulated trees. And so heritage trees are only ones that the city council has designated as being special for historical or whatever reasons. And other cities use heritage trees to mean what we call as like protected or regulated trees, meaning large oak trees, large redwood trees. So I think it's not quite right in the description of the project, and there are some references to in the landscape plans. Like in some of the landscape plans, it mentions heritage trees, but then it also lists protected trees. So it's contradicting itself with regard to excuse me, our city's code. And okay, so that's all that I have for questions, and we move on to comments. Wynn?
Thank you, and thank you for the, as always, beautiful presentation. My principal concern last time was finding number 7, which requires that you provide a good setting not only for the people who are going to be in the building because they have business there, but for the community around it. And while this is part of the research aspect of the medical facility, I mean, of the medical school, it's moving out from where it used to be adjacent to the hospital. It still has a neighbor, which is people seeking treatment and their families. And that's why I was concerned that, in my experience, people seeking treatment and their families want to get out of the hospital, and if you're going to go for a walk and you don't want to shop, you're going to head for this area. And that was why I was concerned about, could you find access to a bathroom? Is there a place to sit? Is there a drinking fountain? I'm satisfied that you have addressed that adequately. So that addresses my concern. I did have one question. So the security, where did this space become secure?
Within the building.
Within the building.
Within the building.
I was reading that right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you look at in the books you've received, Plan Sheet 16, the secure facilities begin at, I'll reference grid lines, maybe is the easiest way to navigate. In the east-west direction, grid 17 indicates a doorway sort of just to the left of the toilets. That would be a secure point. Additionally, in the opposite direction, just north of the orange-colored stairway, there's a doorway there as well. So those apertures, there's another to the south, are the points at which there would be secure access. That said, we would expect fairly low, quite low public traffic into this building, and the university would be looking to, in fact, discourage that at some level.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wynn, is that all?
It
Okay,
is.
thank you. Q.
Yeah, I don't have any comments other than to say that I think we can make the findings to recommend approval. I think if anything on the older findings, I think with the original building design, there was that front door. So I'm reading the last sentence in finding number 2, a new front door for the School of Medicine along Pasture Drive is created in relationship with the new Stanford Hospital. So I think that has changed a little bit. So maybe if we could just strike out that sentence, I think I can make the other findings as is. And you know, you've clearly shown that you've got this kit of parts and you guys know what you're doing. And so I don't have any concerns, and I'd be fine recommending approval. Thank you. Thank you.
Robert?
Okay, based on the limited finding, or I should say limited scope of this portion, I could approve it the way it is. My biggest concern, I'm just going to throw it out again, I'm just not a big fan of kit of parts concept. Never have been, because that's a very attractive looking building, I think, there, but the reality of it is I've been in project or, long-term situations where after you build 5 or 6 of these things, after a while, they just begin to look way too much together. And the average person walking by goes, okay, now is this building 12 or is this building 14? They all begin to look alike. But as I said, seeing as though that ship has passed, I could approve it based on the limited scope that we have. Although I do want to say that in the analysis here, the concept says, or it's written in our thing, the city and Stanford have a shared interest in quality architecture, placemaking, and overall urban design. While there may be some refinements that some may suggest could be made to enhance the landscaping or the other design features, staff concludes on balance that the project meets the required findings for approval. To me, that's settling, and I don't like that. That's it.
And if I can just comment if it's appropriate. So I think the comment there isn't from a place of settling, but with the recognition of the fact that there's still some zoning-related matters that we need to, vet out, and we think that they're going to be addressed. But that's what we're getting at there.
Well, I understand, but I mean, what I'm saying is this paragraph fits perfectly with the concept of kit of parts. So that was my main comment on that. So like I said, but I can approve it the way, based on the scope.
And Peter.
Thank you. Well, I share Robert's reaction to this and feel that the Gateway Plaza and to some extent the other plaza facing Pasteur are, I guess, lost opportunities. They're outdoor spaces that could become really good pedestrian spaces, and I don't think you're going to get them there because there's no way to get into them easily, and they're not really connected to the building. That said, I understand and agree with your logic about the overall planning and how you want the building to be entered from the other side, and that's what functionally makes sense. And reluctantly, I'm happy to settle that I can make the findings to recommend approval.
Gwen, did you have a question?
I was just confused by staff statement. So we don't know yet whether this building complies with zoning?
It does. There's some minor details that we're going to address in plan check having to do with the underground tunnel or the, some of the utility stuff that we're still, at the time that we prepared the report, didn't have those answers to. But you'll see in the staff report that we're also going to include a condition that if there's any substantive changes as a result of the plan refinement, that we would come back to the Architecture Review Board. So the plan that you see before you is the plan that would be approved.
So the aspects of the plan that we are looking at are not involved in the zoning compliance issues?
That's correct.
Which involve an underground tunnel and utility placement?
Right. Areas where we believe that the board would have areas of interest or purview, we believe that those have been addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question regarding the landscape. So it seems like from the last set of plans that we received, there is a change in one of the, there's an addition of an additional relocated oak tree in the northwest oak grove. And I don't know if you explained that, and where's that tree coming from?
The source of that tree is yet to be identified. It could come from a number of sources, whether it's at a nursery or from the campus internally if there's a tree that needs to be located. But the idea is that it's a large coast live oak that matches the grove there so that it kind of reinforces the character of the oaks that are there. And so it's again, not probably the same scale as those existing ones. Those are very large, but it's something in the nature of, something that's like 25 feet in canopy, and so they're big, and so something that we would then again reinforce a kind of teenager-like age oak tree in those areas.
Okay, good. And is there in the light well along Pasture Drive, you're showing a lot of shade-tolerant plants that like moisture. Is there any issues with planting that type of plants that require that kind of water in proximity with the existing oak trees?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're like a wetland type planting. They are plants like Mahonia that can tolerate shade but also tolerate more drier conditions in these, kind of California woodland environments where you won't get rain in the summertime. So the excess of water is the regular type irrigation zone for kind of ground cover planting. And the slope is fairly shallow, so it's not too steep as to kind of sheet off all the water, but it's kind of achieving this delicate balance of getting shade, diversity of planting without requiring a lot of water.
Thank you for that. And so I think that's all that I have with regard to the project. I can support the project. The findings, I think, the existing findings, I think need several edits. So I think one was mentioned, is about the, let me get this. Was number 2, right? I think the entry was mentioned. And then I would say that I would just add a comment. My comment is that the existing Lucas building has a similar entrance location to this proposed project, right? On the, what do you call it? More on the campus drive side of the building in a corner. So it's not like it's something new. This is something that's already been done there. In number 4, it mentions the red roof entry elements that was in the previous design. And I would say that it's been revised to like a trellis.
That's
trellis
correct.
element. In number 7, it mentions that there's a new series of quads and porches. And I know you guys have been calling it a porch. I would actually argue they're closer to plazas. I don't know, maybe that's semantics. But I don't really like the, we're putting porches in the findings. We're putting porches in quotes, and it just, yeah, it doesn't seem quite right, because it's like it's hinting that it's not a porch. So why don't we just call it an entry plaza? And then in number 11, I think maybe we should, which is about natural features, I think maybe we should just sort of state what's happening. Like, let's just say that there are, 3 or 4 oak trees being removed and a certain amount being relocated, right? I forgot exactly how many.
That's correct.
Because it's just a little fuzzy there. It's not really saying that anything's being removed. So those are all my comments. Do we have a motion? Yes, Peter.
On finding number 7, you're talking about the buildings help establish a new series of quads and porches, or however you find it, along both Pasteur and Cooper Lane. I don't find it's true along Pasteur. Can we just scratch that?
Well, we have the porches, but I think that they're trying to create plazas in the oak groves and at the two ends of the building.
That was precisely my comments to them. That's
that
why
there's no entry.
That they're not really successful plazas, and so I don't support that they're plazas along Pasteur.
I would say it may not be an entry plaza to the building, but it's still a plaza for the users in the vicinity. When you go out there at break time or between shifts,
so how
people are walking around taking breaks and chatting on their phone.
So we want to change the word quads and porches to plazas. Is that the proposed change then?
Yeah, because I think we all agree it's not really a porch, right?
So how is it proposed? What are you saying we should make this then?
Well, so I mean, like I was saying a plaza. So like, why don't we go to the sheet? I mean, they've created all these benches, and I've never seen benches quite like.
I'll grant you it's a plaza, yes.
And I would even say it's not even an entry plaza, right? It's just a landscape. It's a landscape plaza.
So if we just change it to say, proposed buildings help establish a series of new plazas. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, then I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I'm not supposed to make the motion, but I'll make I'll make the motion since I made all of the comments on the findings. So, I will make a motion that we approve the project as proposed, as including the attachments. A, with the following revisions, is that we delete the front door sentence in the existing findings. And number 2, number 4, we delete the red roof reference to the red roof elements and replace that with the trellis elements. And number 7, we delete porches and replace it with plazas. And under number 11, if you would just sort of itemize the number of trees being removed and relocated. And then also maybe if we could correct the heritage reference and maybe put in like protected or regulated trees as needed. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
None. So thank you. It passes 5-0.
Thank you, Board. Thank you for your
Great.
time this morning.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break so that the next project can set up. Okay, ready? So we've got item number 4 and 5, and we're going to group them together because they're related. They have been separated because they're different zone districts. So item number 4 is a public hearing in a quasi-judicial matter for 475 Cambridge Avenue. Request for ARB hearing of a tentative approval of an architectural review to allow a steel beam trellis structure over a 28,051 square foot area to support a solar development on the top floor of an existing city parking structure. Environmental assessment is exempt from CEQA per guideline section 21080.35, 15303, and 15301. And that district is PF, public facility. Item number 5 is 275 Cambridge Avenue, request for ARB hearing of a tentative approval of an architectural review to allow a steel beam trellis structure over 20,000 square foot, 20,645 square foot area to support a solar development on the top floor of an existing city parking structure. And again, that one is exempt from CEQA, but this one is in a PC planned community zone. So, Amy French, welcome back.
Thank you. So, Amy French here. I have a PowerPoint today that does lump both projects together. The one slide showing on the screen shows both of the bird's eye views of 275 and 475 Cambridge. As noted, we have one that's zoned public facilities, and that is 475 Cambridge, and the other, 275 Cambridge, is zoned planned community. These structures were built 475 Cambridge in 1968 and 275 Cambridge in 1994. So they both have some life ahead of them. I'll start with 475 as it's first on the agenda. I have some images on the screen showing the contextual site plan showing the buildings in the immediate vicinity, and the roof plan showing the solar panels placed on the trellis. And here's another image showing the site plan. I have a section showing the framing. This is through the middle of the site lengthwise. You can see the ramp here. And then I have a canopy framing plan. So here we have the supports and the steel members that are being placed on the top of this garage at 475. Here are some images of 475, before on the left and after on the right. These images are showing that the steel structure is supporting these solar panels that are not solidly placed. There are spaces between them. Before, after, for each. This image shows a lighting plan and a photometric plan. So underneath the canopies, there will be good lighting for people who are parking on that top parking deck. Now I'm over onto 275 Cambridge, the planned community. And you can see here from the site plan, there are some blow-ups in your plan sets showing spacing of the solar panels on top of the structural steel frames. So for 275 Cambridge, there are two structures that leave the center, 30 plus feet, in the center, an opening between the two structures. This is facing Cambridge, this is facing Mayfield. Here are some images before and after. Left is before, after is to the right. We have a photometric plan for the lighting on underneath the canopies. So we're here because we had a request for hearing following a tentative staff action. This is all laid out in the zoning code. We have here architectural review findings in the approval letter that went out that's attached to your report. And then we have an original request that was submitted for the hearing in a timely manner. And we have the second email that was delivered on March 15th, yesterday, with some reasons why the request was submitted. So in addressing Mr. Borak, who is here today, his statements in his letter of yesterday, I have some comments. So he raises CEQA concerns. And so I would say to that you may or may not agree with the parking deficiency concern for CalAv area, but this is an existing condition that will not be exacerbated by the proposed project. The baseline is for determining whether significant impacts will occur is the existing conditions, and there's no obligation to consider the potential beneficial impacts of a substitute project. The second important CEQA issue is that California no longer considers parking deficiencies in themselves to be a CEQA significant impact. Okay, and there's no evidence that's been provided that these solar panels, structures supporting the solar panels would result in significant impacts. In fact, it's designed specifically to not eliminate parking spaces. So this may be a policy matter, but it's not a CEQA concern for this project or these projects. The Architecture Review Board's focus is the support structures for the solar panels, not the solar panels themselves. Those are not design review in the state of California. They're not subject to design review. Back in September, as noted in the staff report, the council reviewed 4 projects like this, 2 downtown, 2 in CalAv area, and they agreed that these could be considered as minor architectural reviews. And then there was quite a few parameters that were set. Don't lose parking spaces was one of them. And then we've analyzed them to make sure they comply with our applicable codes. I've just put up the ARB findings for later, but we do have comprehensive plan policies that are met with this project on the screen. I have put up there finding 2, we can come back to if need be, and findings 3, 4, and 6. So why don't I put back the images for the discussion? And you can start with 475 first if you'd like. And then let me just say 2 things. Our applicant is here to answer your questions. He did not plan to present anything. And then secondly, the hearing requester, Mr. Borak, had requested in an earlier letter notification, and my error, I did not send an email to Mr. Borak about today's meeting, but he is here, so he'll have the opportunity to comment and make a presentation. I believe he submitted a card.
So he's submitted 2 cards, 1 for each project. So I think that means 10 minutes, as I understand it. So yes, Mr. Borak, please. Yeah, there's no, they're here for questions.
Right, thank you, Chair Liu, and good morning, board members. I did submit a request for a hearing before the Architectural Review Board on these 2 projects because of the issues stated in the letter that I had emailed to you and also delivered yesterday morning to make sure that a copy of it met, because I've noticed from in recent times from a number of projects, ones that I've not been involved in at all, people do have problems receiving notice of what's been going on. So it's not just this particular project manager or this particular project. And it may just be those that come in the post office just don't arrive, because I do have mail problems as well. But in general, those who've received copies of staff reports by other means see that notice has been given to people within a certain distance, and they say, no, we never received it. So I thought it was important to make this request. I've also copied Jack Morton, former council member, who is the president or CEO of the Business Community Association in the California Avenue, both because I've quoted him in my letter and also because it's in the area where he could talk to other people in case they hadn't received notice of the project, and just as a courtesy that he may want to come and talk. It's partly a policy question and partly the environmental question. In regard to the environmental question, it is true that this was brought before the City Council on September 26th, but there was a new project submittal application on November 15th for all 4 of the garages. And it's hard for the council or anyone to make a determination on an application that hadn't been submitted yet. So I don't think we can rely upon what the council did 6 months ago. Also, the council would be an appellate body for any decision that is appealed, and it's not appropriate for them to making a decision on something they're going to appeal on and make that decision before the items even heard before you, and before anyone even knows whether there is an appeal. Finally, under the California Environmental Quality Act, the decision maker is responsible for making the decisions both on the project and the environmental determination. Now, if you say something doesn't apply to CEQA, then that doesn't apply. But even when something's exempt, there still has to be an initial study made to cover all issues rather than just the exception one. The reasons have been stated in my letter. These 2 projects, unlike the ones downtown for solar projects, have the ability to have more parking. And there's clearly a problem in the California Avenue area, and whether anyone else who's interested in that wants to pursue this further, they have to take this step first. They can't go to the council again on this issue unless this board first hears the project and somebody appeals it. So I thought, just for the interest of completion and giving everyone an opportunity to follow through on this problem that I've identified, the fact that, as you can say, these 2 parking garages can have levels added, just like the one at 520 Webster, the Capital Webster one had a couple of levels added after it was built, and that's my main issue, and I appreciate you providing the time for me to speak and for having a rapid meeting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bohr. Are there any questions from board members? Yeah, for staff. There could be the applicant as well.
2 questions. You referenced a state exemption of review of solar panels, so I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about that. And then secondly, were these garages engineered and designed so that additional floors can be added on top of the existing structures?
I have not investigated the structural stability of the existing garages for subsequent levels. What I know, though, is that the city has been focusing on an alternative site, not these sites, for a new parking structure in the Cal Ave area, and it's on Sherman. You'll be seeing these in months to come. In fact, the council will be discussing this in April. That's your second question. I don't know the answer to the structural capabilities of those buildings for upper floors. But again, coming up with funding for that is not subject of this application. And the first question had to do with, remind me? The state exemption. Right. Solar panels themselves for certain kinds of design. Your mic's, yeah. So I don't have the code references, but the state does not allow, state legislation does not permit cities to do design review on rooftop panels. So, they're not being placed on the roof because that's where people park. They're being placed on these new structures, and the new structures are subject to design review, upon which the solar panels would be placed.
Thank you.
Q.
Can I ask what the parking count is for each garage respectively? Do you have that by any chance?
I'm sorry, I do not, and
that's
I
fine.
don't see Public Works here. Thank you.
Peter.
Yes, again, for staff, it's a procedural question, I suppose, but is my understanding that City Council explicitly said that the architectural review of these rooftop structures should be a minor architectural review?
Yes, they did. They said it would, it seems to be eligible for that. I should say that 3 of the 4 projects were planned communities, and they recognized that this, would be a minor alteration to an existing structure. And so, yes.
So that said, as a follow-up, and I suppose there's probably not really an answer to this, but if we were to feel that we did not agree with the what do I call it, appellant, the person who's requesting the hearing, should we then just be pushing this back to the minor level review, or are we supposed to be now reviewing it the same way every other project is reviewed?
Now your task is to see if staff's ARB architectural review findings that we use to approve the project at a staff level are adequate for your action, and we do request action today if that's a possibility.
Thank you.
It's a public hearing, it's not an appeal, just to be clear. So this is an opportunity for a public hearing on the project.
And are we using the same set of architectural review findings for a minor or a major project?
The architectural findings are not specific to major or minor, they're just the findings.
That would be a yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a comment for staff. So I think Wynn was asking about the state requirement. I think there's the California Solar Act. There's also another one, which is like the Solar Shading Act. I haven't read them in a couple years. The Shading Act says that if the city, for example, provides a setback to the panels from the property line, then it has some protections from, say, like neighbors planting trees which would shade on the panels. So in this case, if we're putting the panels right up on the property line, I don't know if we have alleys and stuff, so I don't know. We do. There are a couple adjacent neighbors. There could be a new building on some of those sites would shade the existing or the proposed panels, right? And that would sort of, we wouldn't have any recourse, is my understanding, from the State Solar Shading Act in that case. I think it's really, the one that would be affected would be the, which one's it? I think it's the 275. One has some adjacent neighbors right at the property line. Okay, so that's the only question I had, I guess, comment that I had. Any other? Yeah, Peter, do you want to start? Or?
Sure, no questions, but I'm glad to take a crack at this. I find myself convoluted. I do not agree with what Mr. Borak is saying about why this doesn't meet the standards. I find what Amy French put forth logical and convincing. That said, if you ask me to review this based on the findings we have, I cannot make architectural finding 2 nor architectural finding 3. I feel that these structures, I'm referring to the structures and I'm referring to them on both of these projects, are not compatible with the building they're being mounted on. They're just a totally different non-architectural style. They're not a style, they're just a metal framework. And each of these buildings, each of these structures, these parking garages have a distinct architectural style. They clearly do, and I would expect anyone designing this to think about that a little bit, to put some sort of a column detail or some technical way of putting it together nicely that makes it look better. They're actually fairly large steel elements holding these up. They're big spans and they're fairly deep, and to just leave the end of an I-beam showing at the corner is the easiest way to do it. And I find then finding number 3, high aesthetic quality, the only reason given is because they're painted gray. And I'm sorry, I know we're kind of in a bind here perhaps, but I asked if you want my opinion on it. It's just not cutting it yet. I guess I'll just be very eager to hear what my colleagues think.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, I thought I was the only one who was being nitpicky about it, but I guess I feel exactly the same way. I figured this could go either one of two ways. I've seen panels go up where they are totally utilitarian, but yet they have, you know, aluminum frames, for instance, where they are set on and you understand that that's what it is. This particular design looks like they were going to put a second or a third floor of the building and then ran out of money and just stopped. I agree with you completely as far as the I-beams being exposed. Something like this is either going to need, you know, maybe a metal fascia around the exterior, so it just looks like a, you know, a canopy or whatever. But the way it is now, yeah, I can't make the findings work either.
Q.
This is, it's tough. I guess while we're commenting, I'd just like to go on the record and say, you know, a structure like 475 Cambridge that's nearly 50 years old, to put up a structure to hold solar panels to last another 25 years just doesn't seem right to me. It seems like it's a lost opportunity to either rebuild that parking garage as a taller structure designed with PV panels to be integrated into it, or just something else to be done to it. It's already an ugly parking structure that has horrible circulation around it. It's really horrible around it. It's a one-way circulation around the back alleys. And to think that, you know, we're just gonna slap on some PV panels with a structure in the most utilitarian way possible to meet, you know, city energy goals, to me is quite preposterous. The city deserves better, the residents deserve better, we deserve more parking there, if anything. I do actually have some questions for the applicant. Perhaps I just haven't spent enough time with the drawings, but I'm looking at sheet S3.0 for 275 Cambridge.
Okay. Hello, my name is Robert, by the way.
Hi, Robert, welcome. The canopy there shown on my drawing is actually different than what was shown on a previous slide. Could you clarify what's going on there? To me, it looks like canopy section at grid A, drawing number 2. Maybe it is the same and it's just an optical illusion on my sense, but that drawing compared to the perspective drawing on sheet A 1.0, on sheet A 1.0, it looks like the right, is there another perspective you've got of that? Okay, so on our sheet A 1.0, it looks like half of the structure is actually tilted in the opposite direction than what you're showing in the elevation. I think overall this drawing package was very difficult for us to understand as people that have reviewed drawings for buildings. I understand that, you know, it's just meant to be very practical for a very simple structure to hold the panels, but if we're being asked to review it, I just couldn't make too much sense of it. And then the second question is the structure itself that's holding these panels different for both garages? It seems like one is a tube structure and the other is more of a wide flange structure. Am I reading that correctly?
No, they're both contemplating the same structural elements. The HSS tube still is the vertical columns that are attached to the existing structure, and then the spans are out of wide flange I-beam.
Wide flange, okay.
In both cases.
Okay. So, you know, we're missing 2 elevations, you know, possibly. I mean, I understand that for 275 there are some buildings on each side, but...
So there's some elements on 275 that I think are worth noting, and that is...
Yeah, if you could go over that.
Yeah, that is that it's a very awkward structure. So let me back up a little bit and say that As a design builder, I'm contracted with a solar PPA provider who entered into contract with the city's utility to sell the city renewable energy on a feed-in tariff. The city chose these locations in that request for proposal and identified these 4 garages in particular as good usable space for solar for the purposes of not having any impact on trees, basically encouraging the public to park on the top floor, which typically people don't want to drive all the way up there and then park their car in the sun. So there was a lot of, like you said, sort of practical application to 1, why the sites were chosen, and 2, how we approached it with respect to keeping a trellis-style look, managing the open air elements that are necessary to prevent fire suppression issues that would be associated with the building approval process and that sort of thing. On this particular building, I'm not sure exactly what they were thinking when they built it, but they have this storefront style facade. It's almost like you were in a movie theater on the old Wild Wild West. So that center section, which is a kind of a brick-styled pop-up, basically blocks the view of this really weird lump in the middle that gives you access into the garage. So the design styling, and remember, the objective from the developer and us was to fit as much solar on these as we can so we can have the best possible carbon offset characteristics and generate the most electricity. So when you build a solar system, the modules are always going to be oriented as closely as possible to south. In which case, in both of these garages, the modules will be oriented in the short direction south towards El Camino, right? And so when you ask the question, which way are the modules tilting? If you're looking at that picture, obviously the top cross section, the left side is south and the right side is north. That's why the elements of that structure are south sloping on that side, and then they're leveled out because of those pop-ups are at different elevations, and then the slope on the module is achieved by tilting each individual module rather than tilting the structure in and of itself. That gives us spacing between the panels for inter-row shade, and it also allows a little bit more open air kind of concept. That center section was deliberately left open so that it would, it is the architectural feature of the building, right? And so that's why there's a gap there, because there's a big old hump there. So we're really trying to take these, make them functional for what the intent of the RFP from the city was, and still have them, work both structurally and architecturally. And I can say that neither garage structurally has any capacity to increase or build another story on it. We know that for a fact because we did the structural design for the canopy itself.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you since you're standing there. On the 275 garage, one portion of the photovoltaic array is sloped and the other is flat. And it seems like it's sloped in the wrong direction relative to the solar orientation. Is there any advantage of...
Well, if it's sloped in the wrong direction, that was not the intention. It should be sloped south towards 475. Both the panels and then the southern half, if you will, of the garage is...
So I think the efficiency of the array is not it's not one of my findings, but I was thinking of just architecturally, it might look better if they both matched. And maybe the drawing, well, can we pull up a drawing? Do you have the sheet S?
I don't have the plan set that you're looking at.
Okay, well, I have...
But I kind of have it in my computer, which is...
Yeah, so I was looking at...
What image are you on?
Sheet S 3.0.
And what's the image? What's the image? I can maybe pull it up on the screen.
Yes, canopy section.
Okay.
At grid C.
This is for 275, correct?
So this is like, I'm looking at like the Cambridge Avenue facing facade. Yeah, so that's the top, the top image there. So it seems to me that the south would be on the right side towards, which would be El Camino. So just as in your diagram, the panels are facing the other way, and then the slope is also facing
Yeah,
north.
that's a little misleading because presumably there's a left and right side, so one should be flipped. But in which case the Mayfield Lane view is the proper view. It seems to me that
some things were
you're facing Cambridge view. It just needs to be flipped.
Right.
Yeah, technically this is, I'm sorry, I'll weigh in. Technically the top image is not an elevation, it's a section, and it was taken along that edge. And
Right,
so
I
I didn't flip it to show you how it really looked. I'm sorry about that.
That explains why you guys were saying, this is pointed the wrong way. Now I see what you're saying.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for that. So I am, so I think I understand all the board member comments. I don't think I really disagree with them. I guess my hunch though was to let it move forward because the council's already seen this. They weighed in, they said it's okay. And so we're just having a public hearing at the request of Mr. Borak. So I was thinking that this should go forward, but I'm not seeing a lot of support from the rest of the board. I guess I have a question for staff. Is that if the board can't make the findings, what would happen? You would have to come back with a redesign?
Yeah, I mean, we're asking for a recommendation if you can, one way or the other today, and then the director's
decision
would then make a decision, and if it needs to go to council, it goes to council.
Got it. Okay.
Question, has the council really seen these images? I'm looking at sheet A1.0, showing an image of the 275, and they've seen it this way, with that on top like that?
Yes, we had revisions submitted back in November, but all of these images, we had images for the council to see, befores and afters. The applicant can tell you what what they had provided in their earlier packet, but I believe many of these before and after images were provided to the council in September.
So I'm of the opinion, I'll speak to my colleagues, and that we should just plain say no as a recommendation to the staff. Let the staff bring it up, director bring back to the council, let the council decide on this. I mean, I don't see any redeeming quality at this elevation. It's just not doing it. I mean, and we routinely push other applicants significantly more. And I don't think it's a matter of asking for a few pieces of extra steel. I agree with Robert that it could be done, but maybe this is better to let powers that be make the right decision.
Wynn.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say, I'm not quite sure where we are in the procedural process, but I wanted to say about the CEQA issue that Mr. Borak raised. We now have information, uncontradicted, that this would not support additional stories, presumably without either building a steel cage around it or tearing down the building. I don't think that the lost opportunity rises to the level of a CEQA problem, and I also want to note that Section 15 of the lease gives the city the right to relocate this facility as long as they're willing to pay the essentially costs of relocation and the lost revenue stream to the other party to this lease agreement. So this is not something, this is a problem solvable with money. But I can't make the required findings. And program B5 is cited by the staff, and that's the program that says let's have simplified review processes in order to encourage this kind of thing. I want to encourage this kind of thing, but this is not what's known as a self-executing provision. If the council wants to exempt solar carports, it can exempt solar carports, but we can't. We don't have that authority. And, you know, I devoted my professional life to the proposition that law and language have meaning. So my basic feeling is that if the council wishes to change the review procedures, that's within their power. But it's not appropriate to ask us to make a finding that is not supported by the evidence in front of it. So my only option here is to vote no.
Well, I think that
Well, we need a motion before we start saying where we're
To say
voting.
no to the project, I beg your pardon.
Okay, any other comments before we try to make a motion?
Well, I guess.
Sorry, but isn't it pretty much also, if nobody makes a motion, then it's pretty much dead anyway?
Yeah, we have to.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I want to ask staff, we want to work collaboratively, we want to see this get done, and this could be redesigned and approved with some work, with some designers having a different set of goals. Respectfully, you outlined what your intentions were.
Yeah, as directed by the city's RFP. So because the city's contracted for purchase of electricity at a fixed rate, you can do a lot of things, right?
So
you can make it pretty, but it will affect the contract.
So if I could, though, I mean, I think that he designed this with a certain objective in mind, and I think we would agree he achieved his objective. Our standards are different, and it's really a question of what standards we're holding this to, like we said. So maybe staff should help us out. Do you want a quick no, you can run with this as you like, or do you want a long process of revising the design?
Well, but I mean, just because I understand where you're coming from completely, and you did what you were basically requested to do. I have no problem with that, but I'm also not going to say, well, in that case, I'm going to vote, it's okay. I'm still going to vote no. So I think we just vote no, and then basically leave it up to the city to either overrule us, which the director can do, or move it up to the city council.
But what if they want to just make a revision to it and see if they can bring it into...
Because, I mean, I don't mean to talk for you, but that's going to cost a whole lot more money. And if he bid on it, that means he bid it based on a certain design and not something that's been elaborated with putting a fascia or whatever the case on, which, let's face it, is going to knock it out of his calculations.
I was hoping to get what the staff thinks would be the most helpful.
Okay.
Fail. Yeah. So, part of this whole setup had a time certain for the applicant to get through the process with the lease. So, there are options as far as extending the lease. There are also other, providers waiting in the wings in case this doesn't get approved. So just to give you this scenario, what we have out there. So, this applicant has, interest in this project. A lot of money's been spent already. It would be up to them to pretty much negotiate extension of this lease and see if that works, over which time some changes could be made, and that's one way to do it, is to continue to a date uncertain, and they can see if they can extend their lease because they won't meet the current lease's terms. Or you can offer a quick recommendation for denial. It goes to the director, and the director could refer it to the city council for them to make a decision.
With respect, Amy, you just told me what I told you. We wanted to know what you guys think we should do. What do you want?
So I
I'm
think...
just looking for some guidance, because we don't want to be against each other. We want to know
A little more detail
what's
about the lease,
most
so
I appreciate that.
Well, I mean,
What's the most helpful thing?
From a different angle then, you mentioned that the city council has seen these drawings and the before and after.
That's true.
Now, I get the impression they didn't have a whole lot of heartburn about them.
It was a unanimous vote in favor of moving forward with the project, yes.
Then, so what I'm saying is we're looking at this differently than they're looking at it.
Fair enough.
So I think we need to do what we need to do and stay true to what our function is. And if they don't agree with that or they want to override that, they have the ability to do that. And to keep on track, I think the easiest solution is to just vote no and then go back to the city council. I mean, that's the probably the fairest way for them to keep it on track. And considering they voted, was it 9, whatever, unanimously to approve it,
So
they couldn't have had too much heartburn based on that.
I want to just clarify something. So we took the application, we went to the city council, September?
September 26th.
Last year, because one, we wanted to affirm our perspective that the proposed solar structures were consistent with the planned community ordinances that were approved for 2 of the parking structures, and with the zoning regulations to support the structures. And in communicating, in trying to seek that guidance from council, we also informed them that the process that we intended to evaluate these solar structures was going to be through a minor AR review, which is a staff level approval. And there was some discussion about that, and the council did have copies of the photo simulations and plans, but their vote is one of, yes, it's consistent with the codes, and yes, we support the process by which the structure would be reviewed. Understanding that that could have requests for hearings and appeals and so forth.
I understand that, but it's also, if I was, if I was in their place, looking at it, just is the thought that if I really didn't like the way this looked, I think I would have said something. Rather than just, yes, okay, you're telling me that it meets all the code requirements, but this is going to be built in my town or my city, and I think it's, ugly, or whatever the case is. As a council member, I would assume I would have said something.
Right, and I don't think either one of us could speak on
No, I
behalf of
understand
the
that,
council
right,
members, but I think the process was understood, and so I think that's what the conversation was about. And also the council, clearly, as we noted in the staff report, there's competing interests here too, or maybe not competing, but there are shared or additional interests of how we support our sustainable energy resources. And so I think the council, as they do with many decisions, have to balance different potentially competing
But then,
attributes.
from a pragmatic standpoint, doesn't it make more sense to just vote no and let this the process go on?
And to that point, if I may, I think, Board Member, I believe your comments from a few minutes ago were probably the most salient to the conversation, and when you outlined the process. The board, I would encourage the board to make a decision. I don't think the timeline provides one for review and iteration. I don't think that's where we are, unfortunately, for this particular application. And the board's recommendation goes to the director. The director could support that decision or make an alternative decision. That decision could ultimately be appealed by applicant or any member of the public. So I think that's the most expedient way to move the project forward. And if there is a recommendation for denial, we would recommend that there be some findings to support that based on your 6, not all 6, but just, I think you mentioned findings 2 and 3, if you can provide some color to that.
Okay, are we ready to have a motion then? Okay, well, I move that we recommend denial of the project based on finding number 2 not being met, in that the design, neither the design for 275 nor 475 has a design that is unified and coherent with the design of the existing buildings. And then finding number 3, I also find that we're unable to make, and that the design is of a high aesthetic quality. I do not find that the design is of a high aesthetic quality. The design is of a very utilitarian quality. And very little effort has been made to make it above a normal standard of aesthetic quality.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The recommendation for denial is 5-0.
I'd like to go on the record once again that even if we were to make this a pretty structure, it's still a huge lost opportunity, especially with the garage that's nearly 50 years old. I just want to say that on the record.
And just to clarify, so that was for the 2 items that you have on your agenda, item number 4 and item number 5. That motion carries for both of them.
Yes. Okay.
Do you need 2 separate ones or something? Because
Well,
they're
it's 2
2
projects.
separate items.
2 projects. Yeah. Oop, what's that? Okay. We have one last item, which is the approval of the minutes for February 16th, 2017. I think when you had mentioned you had some comments on that.
I realized that my comments were actually about a previous set of minutes where I said Levi-Strauss Eras, H-E-I-R-E-S-S, not Eras, E-R-A-S. But I don't think that rises to the level of something that needs to be addressed by this group. I'll send the correction to staff. Move approval.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
I abstain.
Okay, so that's a 4-0, 1 abstain by Falte. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Do you know when Randy's hotel is coming back?
Soon. He's worked, yeah, he mentioned, I talked to him the other day. On both, there's Harmony and also the San Antonio.
I have to sit on both, I think, because I have a working relationship with him, not on those projects, but on other projects.
Okay. That's fine.
Just letting you know, heads up.
Yes, those,
Because that leaves the board